Hi, it's Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief at The Contrarian. If it's Monday, I must have Pablo Torre with me to talk sports and society and race and violence and law and everything else in between. Pablo, so good to see you.
Good to be here. As always, sports does not take a weekend off, nor
No, it
politics.
does
So happy to
not.
do it.
It does not. Let's start with something that's pure sports before we get into heavy material, and that is that wild finish at the US Open Golf. First of all, the scores were unbelievably, whichever way you want to look at it, low or high, an incredibly tough course. And then JJ Spaun, who's never won a Masters, is not, in the top ranks, manages to win it. What was your sense of that match? And what does it tell us about golf and also the diversity of golf that we're seeing more and more?
Yeah, I related to JJ Spawn on a number of key levels as this was Father's Day, and I am a dad. He is somebody who had never won a major. He is somebody who is of Filipino descent on his mom's
Yes.
side. He is somebody who, uh, frankly, had struggled up until
Yeah.
this sort of point, up
Right.
until this particular moment at Oakmont, which is one of the hardest courses in Pennsylvania and the world. And he had started his day, just so people are caught up on like what it's like when you're not Tiger Woods or Rory McIlroy. He had started his day at 3:30 a.m. because his daughter named Violet, and I also have a daughter named Violet, crucially to the
Oh
story.
my. Wow.
She woke up puking, and so we had to go to CVS. And so just the way in which this was a normal guy who is not your typical golfer became somebody who is now the owner of a historic walk-off putt, a 64-footer. That's one of the greatest shots anyone's ever seen to win the thing, to win his first major is it was truly one of those Father's Day miracle stories that you just
Yeah,
remember because sports does this sometimes.
exactly.
It provides
Exactly.
a character you've never heard of before, only to realize, oh my God, I think that's if anyone is like me in golf, it's that guy. Even if, to be very clear, I am not a golfer in the slightest. So
Right.
it was just delightful.
And he has also was diagnosed, first misdiagnosed and then correctly diagnosed as a diabetic. So he does these phenomenal things all the way through as he manages a health condition, as many Americans have to do. But the ability to manage a health condition, manage those conditions, in a field where the top golfers in the world are seven over, eight over, six over, was really a pretty extraordinary feat. Just the mental pressure of all of these people like collapsing under the pressure of that course.
Yeah, the mental pressure is the way that golf absolutely has been a test of, you know, golf is often made fun of. I make fun of golf a lot because, it's golf, right?
Right.
There is no defense. There is no real like running. In fact, can you bring a cart was a big legal case in the sport. All of this is so. But at the same time, when it comes to psychological torment and pressure, golf tests you in real ways. And so the fact that there was, I believe, an hour and a half or so, if not more than that, of a rain delay, of a weather problem,
Yes.
and then you have all of these guys who are just, yeah, who are flailing. And in comes this guy who proves to be at his best under some absurd pressure. Yes, golf proves a lot when the course, as someone put it, I believe after the tournament, as it reasserts that it is an outdoor sport, and that is
Exactly.
true as
The
well.
elements, you got to manage the elements. But I think all of us had this moment where we thought, could everybody fall apart and Scotty Scheffler be the last one standing? Because he stayed at about par and everyone keeps drifting down. And he's still at plus four, plus five, but he keeps moving up the standings. And I'm thinking, I wouldn't count him out.
Yeah, look, the episode I did last week on my show about golf was about Trump and Saudi Arabia and Live and the PGA and this would-be merger that has now like gone back on every claim of anti-competitiveness and monopolistic behavior that Live
Yes.
was volleying towards the PGA. But one of the characters who did emerge, who stuck with the PGA, is Scotty Scheffler. One of these guys who, again, like we didn't, before Scotty Scheffler got in that dust up with that police officer, when he was driving into the tournament, right? There's too long to explain here, but just like there were ripped pants, there was a lawsuit, it was absurd, but like that guy emerged again as a character I didn't know, and now one of the protagonists of golf. And anyway, golf, big picture, is one of the ways that we understand, as we always do, Jen, the larger issue of corruption. Why does Trump want a piece of this? Why does Saudi Arabia want a piece of it? One thing we report in the episode we did was that one key goal is for Donald Trump and Yasir Al-Rumayyan, who is the money man for MBS, who's running the Live Tour. They want to be members at Augusta. They
Mhm.
want to be in the most exclusive clubs that only a certain handful of people get to join. And it's not just, for better and for worse, you can't just buy your way in. You can't
Yeah.
just arm wrestle politically your way in. There are some rooms that you got to navigate your way into, and sports is full of them, which is why we might be seeing the sport remade in the sort of, again, dystopian image of these men because they value what these golfers have.
Well, isn't that an image in life? Be a JJ Spawn, not a Donald Trump,
Yes.
be
Yes.
the decent, hardworking guy. So it wouldn't be Monday and it wouldn't be sports if sports did not intersect in a very big way with politics. And I saw two things that really struck me. One was after the horrendous assassination, and it's hard to use that term in America, but it was the assassination of Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the near assassination of another lawmaker, Senator Hoffman and his wife. Every single Minnesota team put out a statement condemning the violence and supportive, which was more, frankly, than the White House did. And that was example A. And then example B was not the team, but one Dodger in particular, who is a very beloved guy in Los Angeles, Kike Hernandez, put out
Yeah.
really a moving, eloquent statement about his support for immigrants, about being part of an immigrant city. What did you make of these two events? On one hand, all the teams, and the other, frankly, one guy, but the rest of the LA teams have really been pretty quiet as they willingly take the money of their Hispanic fan base.
Yeah, I saw it over the weekend in contrast to what actual US Senator from Utah, Mike Lee, was doing, which was trafficking in like already debunked
Unbelievable.
and
Unbelievable.
just like horrifying in every way, both with its disregard for the truth, but also with its disregard for what it means to be a basic human, let alone
Yes.
a political figure who is expected to be a leader in any way. And he's out here trafficking in like QAnon, sub QAnon level conspiracy at this point about why this happened and whose side was this assassin on. Look, sports has a way of reflecting what's happening in the larger community it exists in. It has an obligation, you could argue, to reflect that community because these are civic institutions,
Yeah.
right? If you want public money, if you want to be
Right.
branded as something that is bigger than just sports, which every team does, then you're expected to, I would say, act with some like fundamental level of humanity when something inescapable is happening in the place where you work. And so we saw that in Minnesota. And again, not a high bar, but so much higher
Right.
than where some actual senators have been living, let alone the
Exactly.
president has been living. And then in LA, you see, you're right, a variant on this because, it's interesting. Every team, every sports broadcaster, they got to figure out when are we a candy machine that is spitting out sardines, right? People come to us for joy and candy. Do we want to
Right.
give them the serious and the bad tasting when it comes to just like the real world intrusions? But LA, to be very clear, and we've talked about this already, Jen, not foreseeing specifically this, but broadly what my experience was like at Dodger Stadium. This is a at Los Angeles is 48% Latino Hispanic. Dodger Stadium is full of that fan base, full of that spirit. And so Kike Hernandez saying the obvious thing, which is to say that baseball is a sport that is so Spanish speaking, played by players who assuredly, in the demographic sense, have all of the characteristics to be stopped by a secret police these days, regardless of their paperwork or not. That's what he was speaking to. That's what I wish his employer was speaking to more openly, if not for the fear that, ooh, we got to stick to sports here. It's very conspicuous when certain teams choose to stay out of it, and it's a shame that the Dodgers have so far to that extent.
And it's not just the fan base and it's not just the players, but the people who work the concessions, the people
Yes.
who keep the grass, the people who work in every stadium, in the back office. These are really incredibly diverse and very Hispanic organizations. And LA teams, this is probably true in many cities, but particularly in LA, they all have Spanish language broadcasts
Oh
that
yeah.
accompany their team because that's their fans. And I think it is a grave mistake for them to kind of pretend it's not happening, hide their eyes. I'll tell you, there was a president who spoke up about ICE, but it wasn't ours. It was the president of Mexico who spoke up because there is a prominent tournament, a soccer tournament going on with Mexico on one side, Venezuela on the next. And she was pleading with ICE not to go into the stands and start arresting people during a soccer game, which on one hand struck me as incredibly sad, but also pointed what's going to happen when the World Cup comes here? I mean,
Yeah.
where are we going
Yeah.
to be?
Yeah, the World Cup. So the Club World Cup, which is a thing Trump was talking about, or rather that his administration was talking about, we're going to have ice at the gates, right? This was happening in South Florida. The
Right.
Club World Cup itself is just one of these. It's really interesting when a famously corrupt institution like FIFA, which administers the World Cup,
Yes.
creates a fake World Cup called the Club
Yes.
World Cup, in which it's not nations, but it's professional teams, Manchester United, Inter Miami, like these individual teams. And they use the name of the World Cup and a trophy, which 3 months ago was paraded around the White House for Donald Trump, this spinning, golden, beautiful trophy that the head of FIFA said, we're going to keep this here. We're going to give it to the winner, but then we're going to bring it back. Like we're going to have it at the White House as like a permanent residency to use that term, I guess. It was something that spoke of just like an invention, an autocratic invention that was celebrating really the people who were profiting off of this event in the first place, as opposed to anything resembling truly sports. Players didn't care about it, fans don't really care about it, had never existed before, but Trump wants that trophy. And so when it comes to ICE and what the president of Mexico is saying, and when it comes to what are you doing here, this feels like not merely a thing that is bad for business, that would be in conflict with the desires of anybody administering a sporting event, not just because there are people who might be undocumented, but even more so because there are people who don't trust those stopping them to know the
Exactly.
difference. And
Exactly.
and we've seen this, whether it's unmarked vans, whether it is secret police disappearances to CCOT, whether it's any number of people who just are unjustly apprehended and disappeared. It's daring people to show up. And my instinct is that people will not. And so when it comes to what they're doing to sports, just imagine they are using sports when convenient, and they're also actively undermining the very premise that you are welcome here, that you're here to watch the game too. It's pretty nightmarish.
And I would just add two things. The result, very predictably, of this Team World Cup is the games are atrocious because they've gone around and chosen teams at wildly different levels. So
Yes.
10 to nothing, 4 to nothing. The games are unwatchable. Now, maybe in subsequent rounds, as the sub-performing teams get weeded out, the games will be more competitive, but it's a joke. It really is a joke. But I would just end on this. What face are we showing to the world? You get the World Cup because your country wants to show the world, like the Qataris try to do, that they're a modern, healthy, welcoming society. And the face that we are going to be showing to the world when the real World Cup comes is we're divisive, we're exclusionary, we're violent, we don't know who we really are as a people. And if you come here, watch out because you might get disappeared. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just pathetic.
I covered the World Cup for 5 weeks when it was in Brazil in 2014.
Yeah.
And you see how, look, the cynical view of the World Cup as an institution is that it's a Potemkin village for a government to prop up so that people visit and they say, wow, look how nice everything is. What's so darkly fascinating about the US's approach to the World Cup is that they're kind of doing the opposite. As you
Yes.
say, they're saying, look at how autocratic we are.
You
Look at
know,
how you think that we had historically been the vanguard of civilization. And here we are, whether it's military parades that are underattended and embarrassing, whether it is disappearances by a Gestapo, whether it is border security at the gates of arenas, whether it is protests flooding the streets as a result of all of this and more, what the US is signaling under Donald Trump is that we are actually a third world country like the ones that you think we are above.
right.
And that is the grand, I mean, it's not just irony, it is self-destruction. Like,
Absolutely.
what is the point of any of this?
Exactly.
And I find myself asking that question about a zillion things these days, but the World Cup in particular.
And the Olympics as well. I, for one, I go back and forth, which is more corrupt, FIFA or the IOC? FIFA or the
It's a
IOC.
hard, it's a hard
And then
race.
there's the NCAA that's making like a play for that same
Yes.
title. But, I didn't like watching the Olympics for many years because it was in these totalitarian countries. Why are you rewarding Sochi? Why are you rewarding Russia? Why are you right China? Well, now that it's going to be in Los Angeles, I gotta say, I have a little bit of the same feeling. Like, really, we deserve to be celebrated? I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very sad.
Let's put it this way. If I'm living abroad and the choice is, do I watch this thing from home or do I
Yes.
risk being imprisoned in the United States? Doesn't seem like that hard of a call to me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we hate to end on kind of a downer, folks. We do have an NBA finals going on. Not a lot of people are watching, but it's very competitive. And how great for two cities that don't get a lot of attention. So Indiana and Oklahoma City. You have a prediction at all between those two?
I've been saying Thunder in six since before the series started. The final started. I will say that the reason to tune in is because everybody in the national media basically said some version of what I just said, and we might be wrong. So if you want
Right.
to, if you do want a reason to laugh at the fourth estate that is guilt-free, we all
Yes,
may have gotten the NBA finals incredibly
exactly.
incorrect.
And as they say, that's why they play the games,
It is.
because, what can happen. So thank you, as always, Pablo. We will try to keep an optimistic outlook as we look to sports sometimes to be better than we are, but also kind of a reflection of who we are. So we will look forward to next time and have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jen. Yep.
Bye.